Welcome back to another episode of the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. I am your host, Dr. Harbir Sayan. Thank you so much for taking the time, as always, to join me here on the podcast to learn and to grow. We are recording a couple of special episodes here at Prpic Eye Care with my man, Dr. Petar Prpic. I want to make sure that we're always learning, we're growing, we're getting information to help improve our professional lives, our careers, and the profession as a whole. And definitely these conversations that we're gonna have here with Pete are gonna be that type of conversation that's gonna help make us all better. Now, if you learned something, as always, from this episode or any episode, please make sure you share it, take a screenshot, put it up on Instagram, put a link on LinkedIn, wherever, send it to your mom. Just make sure everybody's learning and listening and helping grow the podcast. And of course, if you could leave a review at the same time, I wouldn't mind that either. All right, now, my man, Dr. Petar Prpic, is a graduate of none other than NECO, New England College of Optometry, go NECO, in 2013. He's a recipient of the NECO Presidential Medal. He is a fellow of the Scleral Lens Education Society. He is the co-owner of this beautiful office, Prpic Eye Care in North Burnaby in BC, with his brother Ivan. We'll give a shout out to Ivan Prpic as well, also a NECO grad. And he is a member of the BCDO board, a BC Doctors of Optometry board. He's chair of the CE committee and recently a recipient of the Young OD of the Year from the BCDO. He is a multifaceted, already very successful OD. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you, Harbir. It's great to be here.
So as I already said off the top, we're gonna be talking about specialty contact lens, building a specialty practice. You've really done that here in your own practice, but just generally in your career already. You fit a lot of sclerals and other specialty contact lenses. One thing I didn't say off the top in that long intro, I did not mention a residency. A lot of times when we think about going into some kind of specialty care, whether it's specialty contacts or glaucoma management, VT, whatever, we always talk about getting a residency or being residency trained, but you are not. So tell me, how important was it for you? Did you need the residency? Obviously you didn't, but like how important is it, or how did you develop this skill set without the residency, maybe is the question.
Yeah, so I always had an interest in a lot of things, and a lot of things obviously through school, it was revolving around oct disease and, like a lot of, grads and students, that's what sort of is exciting, and really had a strong interest in that, and always enjoyed aspects of the contact lenses, but never really sort of dove deep into it. It really wasn't until sort of practicing that, you start seeing more and more patients, and so I started falling in love with sort of the sort of practice of specialty lenses and just contact lenses, and really diving deep into it, and sort of my passion for it grew after graduation. And obviously by then didn't have a residency, and I tried to establish myself amongst my peers, amongst some of the specialists in the area, to sort of really be someone that they can trust and refer to. And I didn't have that residency sort of behind my name to sort of have that conversation. And so it took a lot of work, to be honest. Took a lot of stuff on my own to sort of really, essentially build the same experience, that same knowledge base that someone would get through a residency, but try to do it on my own. Yeah. So a lot of nights sort of, reading papers, doing things, experimenting, with sort of making sure that I just am exposed to a lot of different types of lenses and a lot of different types of patients. And so it took a lot of work, and that was sort of what ended up leading to the becoming the fellow of the Scleral Lens Education Society, is really trying to have some sort of opportunity to sort of prove my education and prove my knowledge base, and sort of what led me wanting to explore that as well.
It makes sense if you want to establish yourself as sort of an expert in the space and somebody that your colleagues would be comfortable referring to. Having those letters after your name and all that kind of thing is one of those ways to do it. But building those relationships, building the network, and other forms of proof that you can help, our patients, or your colleagues' patients, and showing them patients that you have treated and helped already, case studies that you have of your own. I think that's a good way to just go about it, doing your homework. Essentially what you would have done in the residency, but now you're doing it without that formality of that program, right? You mentioned in there different types of lenses. Now, I'm relatively new. You and I have talked about this a few times. I'm relatively new to the world of specialty contacts. I dabble a little bit in sclerals and ortho-K and that kind of thing. And those are the two types of specialty lenses I think most of us will think about. Sclerals, maybe RGPs kind of more broadly, and then ortho-K. But what are some of the other types of lenses that you're fitting? Because you gave me a list the other day and I was like, whoa, that's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, so we fit a lot. I like to fit all types of lenses. So whether it's corneal GP lenses, whether it's scleral lenses, ortho-K lenses, there's even things that are coming out that are like free-form GP lens designs, which are amazing. There's impression-based scleral lenses, there's hybrid lenses, there's sort of, we fit a lot of sort of specialty soft, custom softs, especially for as even almost like custom bandage soft lenses, you know, sort of large diameter soft lenses for different types of sort of disease modalities. And so any contact lens that's out there, yeah, I like to fit nowadays.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there that we just as kind of primary care practitioners, we don't see or use ourselves, even if we do fit a little bit of sclerals and stuff like that, but there's all those other various forms. So I think that's really important to know. First of all, you know, that when you get into some sort of specialty, you start to dig up, there's all these other things within there that you don't do as often. But for those of us in the area, you know, that may need to refer to somebody who does that kind of stuff. We know that you're here, but if you're living in a different province or somewhere in the US, I would recommend you try to find someone like Peter who has the experience fitting all these different complex forms of lenses, so that way you know who to send your patients to. As we're going to go further in this conversation, you know, there are patients where we might try to help them and we kind of hit a wall and we're like, I've tried everything in my tool bag. Doesn't mean, you know, that there aren't more tools in somebody else's toolkit that they could potentially use, right? Like yours. And we're going to also, you know, one thing I didn't say off the top that I think is really relevant, we're going to talk a little bit about how you actually went about building your practice, building a referral base, all this kind of thing. And a lot of these things, even if you're not into specialty contact lenses, a lot of these lessons and this information can be transferred over to pretty much any type of specialty that you're trying to build, right? Whether it's dry eye or some others, there's a lot of parallels between specialty contact lens or any other type of specialty. So I want to get into that now. You know, you kind of mentioned you had patients, you were seeing a need within your own patient base, and you thought, let's lean into this. But there are points, there's got to be multiple stages along the way where you're like, okay, it makes sense. Now I'm going to lean into this a little bit more. But now you got to weigh out the costs and benefits of the time it takes to do more of this versus selling glasses or doing some other type of care. Tell me a little bit about how that started. Like, what was the first early decision where you're like, I'm going to lean into this a little bit more? What were you seeing?
So that started actually pretty quick after graduation, where chatting with some colleagues and sort of even talking to some people that I knew from other provinces that were looking to sort of refer patients that were moving, you know, here locally, you know, who should they refer to, and realize that there was an opportunity to sort of really dive into this, and little by little been trying to expand it. And I think when I think about like, how do you implement this? How do you really build anything? As you said, what works for this, I think works for any other specialty, is that you have to know what you're doing first and foremost, right? You have to sort of be on top of what's out there when it comes to what can we offer? How can we troubleshoot these things? You need to have a certain amount of knowledge base with whatever it is, and sort of be able to cater to what patients really need. That's the first thing. The other thing too is really just the implementation. You know, whether it's staff training, whether it's sort of, you know, flow within the clinic, whether it's how you schedule things. I think that there's a lot that goes into it that, you know, sort of, you need to sort of think of it all as a whole.
So tell me a bit about that. Like, I'm kind of in this place myself right now, right? Because for me, this journey into specialty contact lens is still very new, but I'll have a patient and I'm not very good at fitting sclerals. Ortho-K, if I do my patient selection really well, and I do kind of the more topography, computer assisted, it's actually quite easy and streamlined, but sclerals still take me a while. So I'll have a patient where now I've spent a couple of hours with them all together, right? Doing the initial diagnostic fit and then the readjustments that need to happen after and all of this and the training. And I start to wonder, is it actually worth all that time? Like, yes, the fees are fairly high and the revenue can be nice, but if you end up spending 2-3 hours with a person, is it actually worthwhile versus just selling a good pair of glasses to them?
Right, and I think that's where you have to understand your business, right? Look at the numbers. Like, I love monitoring the metrics of our practice, and it helps you make those decisions, right? And helps you get an idea of sort of how is this going to fit into what you're doing day to day. If you know sort of what your revenue per patient is in a sort of comprehensive exam, and you sort of know how many visits do I generally, you know, do I need to sort of set aside for a scleral lens fit, right, you can sort of do some simple math and figure out, okay, at what point are you better off just selling more glasses as opposed to diving into these specialties, yeah, right? And that's just one layer. But the other one too is sort of the staff training. You know, one way to help manage the impact on your schedule and your personal kind of time with the patient, yeah, is staff training. And we do a lot of staff training. We set aside time every week for our staff training that we do. And it encompasses a lot of different things, from sort of routine kind of training for different types of things, but a lot of it revolves around how we want to sort of offer care to our patients. And one thing we always tell our staff, especially like for this specialty lens aspect, if I want to be a referral center for my colleagues, for some of the other sort of eye care providers in the area. I don't want someone calling our office and saying, oh, I'm here to book a scleral lens appointment, and my staff going, a what?
Yeah.
And not having an idea of what that means. And so making sure that, at face value, the patient walking our doors feels this is a place that they can trust. Really. And I think that's what is important for any specialty and any referral, whether it's from a colleague, another, patient, is really establishing that trust. And they need to feel like we know what we're doing truly. And so there's that front end side of training where everyone understands the conditions we're treating, the lenses we're using. If someone's going to book for a consult, what does that mean? How much time are we allocating? Where in the schedule can that go? And so there's the front end that if that part isn't done right, I never get to see that patient.
100%.
Right? That patient calls and says, I don't know if this is what I want to go, where I want to go and what I want to do. So we need that level of training first and foremost. And then once they're here, sort of, being able to train staff and empower staff to do aspects of sort of the scans, aspects of sort of, the training, the insertion removal training, being able to empower them to do that just helps make it much more streamlined for the office.
Yeah, that's amazing advice. And again, everything you just said there transfers over to any type of specialty you're trying to incorporate into your business. And actually, I give a couple of different lectures on starting, I call them in dry eye or in myopia management, I call it the dry eye startup or the myopia startup. So for somebody who's trying to build sort of from square one, some sort of specialty into their practice. And a lot of times, especially with the dry eye one, when I give that lecture, a lot of people are kind of like, okay, tell me about the IPL and tell me about the radio frequency, or tell me about the ortho K. Well, hang on. Actually, step one is what I call kind of developing your algorithm of what is the step-by-step process, the patient journey going to be when somebody calls your office. And that makes sense, and that's some of the training that we do, even just with overall, if we want to up our optical sales, a lot of that comes from that first phone call when somebody calls in. We want to, start to hit a different demographic or clientele, right? Well, if they're going to call and the person on that phone is going to be like, well, I'm not really sure what you're asking about, that you're not going to attract those people into your practice. So that's actually a really, really important lesson, I think, for all of us to learn. So from there, you started doing that staff training. You spend how long every week? An hour?
We do an hour of staff training.
Every week?
Paid, yeah. And it's something we've done since square one. My brother and I both truly feel very strongly about sort of education. And we knew how we wanted to practice. We had an idea, of sort of how we wanted to offer care and the things that were sort of like non-negotiables with sort of, patients coming through our practice in our clinic. And it's not fair for us to expect a staff member to sort of just know that right off the bat. And we're constantly telling our staff that if they're not doing something to our expectation, well, it's our job to make sure that we're telling them what to do, how to do it first and foremost, right? And so, whether it's, again, the specialty lens aspect, as you said, whether it's sort of just how to answer the phone or anything else within the practice, we've always felt very strongly, and we've allocated, like I said, it's part of their paid work week is an hour of staff training once a week. So Excellent. You know what? We've been a little slow on that in our practice. We would do meetings, but they would be a little haphazard as far as the scheduling. But a little while ago, we started doing the exact same thing. And I told my staff that that's now our priority over even patient care. This 1 hour meeting every week takes priority. So block the schedule, whatever time in the morning, and we're alternating it. So that way, it's a different day every week, because that way some staff are maybe not there on a Thursday, but they'll be there on a Friday. But yeah, we've started to do this, and it's remarkable actually how much of an impact that will have on staff confidence, their technical abilities, but also how they just feel about being at work, like they're being cared for, they're being spoken to like more regularly. They're not just willy-nilly like just trying to make stuff up. And it's so hard to like have these conversations and like almost troubleshoot things that are going to come up, right? Because as you get busy, exactly, even my brother and I sometimes, how much time we actually have to sit and have a discussion or go over things, right? You can't always do that as you're walking by each other in the clinic, right? Totally. You need to, allocate the time. You need to set it aside so that you can sort of just discuss what needs to be discussed.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's something that I've become actually. Funny enough, if Harleen listens to this, she's gonna like roll her eyes at me, but like I've become quite passionate about this over the last little while. She's been the one I was telling you earlier, is really on top of like the admin side of things and like always trying to like set up meetings, and I was always kind of like, oh yeah, sure, whatever, whenever. And now like I'm like much more passionate about it, and to a point where we're texting every single day. And then we'll be on the phone for a good long conversation weekly, and then we'll do our staff meetings weekly. So there's a lot now going on, and doctor meetings we're trying to set up. Doctors are a little bit more harder to wrangle than staff, but we're working on getting those people in. But yeah, I can just to kind of like echo everything you're saying, like it's really cool that you guys have done that since day one, because I can imagine that's had a profound probably like immeasurable impact on how well your business is going to do after 5 years or 10 years down the road. And of course, going back to the main topic of discussion, when we're going to any kind of specialty, it's vital. Otherwise, you won't have everybody on the same page. You won't help to build that specialty. Okay, I want to go back to so that's staff training, really important. You dedicate an hour, paid hour of time for your staff every week. What about doctor training? What about yourself or any other doctors in your office? If you want to try to get them on board with some sort of specialty care, what kind of training do you recommend that ODs will do?
And I feel like we live in a world where nowadays the resources are out there, right? You know, it's not just let's find a book that's going to offer this. There is so many good webinars that are recorded. There is so many good CE events and lectures and conferences that revolve around the things that we might be interested in truly. You know, there's some of the specialty lens conferences. I really enjoy going to GSLS in Vegas every year if I can make it. And it's just, you know, sort of immersing myself in the sort of industry. Again, there's Facebook groups, there's again, podcasts, right? You know, there's essentially now we live in a world that the amount of information out there is no longer the limiting factor. And limiting factor is now the time. So truly, I truly believe that, you know, and that's sort of how I was able to sort of build my sort of experience really was to and it was through my interest, right? I spent a lot of time, you know, sort of in the evenings just going through the papers, reading things, listening to webinars on my own and attending these conferences. And that sort of is what really allowed for a lot of my growth. That and just sort of, you know, implementing it. Don't be shy to sort of, you know, get the ball rolling. Don't be shy to try things out. You know, it's something that there's resources, even just the labs that we work with, you know, the consultants are a great resource as well too. If you ever sort of hit a snag, you're ever not sure what the next step should be, is, you know, sort of have that consultation, you know, talk to them, you know, talk to your peers as well too. You know, there's a lot of people that do these things are very happy to share. Totally. Right. And whether it's, you know, especially lens, whether it's sort of dry, the people that are really invested in this, you know, sort of are very supportive of others that, you know, if there's ever a question. I'm really lucky that I have some sort of classmates, some colleagues, some friends that sort of have done, you know, very, very amazing things in this space. And so I'm leaning on them constantly to sort of pick their brain and help me out too. So
that's so important. That's amazing. And you are a perfect example, excellent example of that, Pete, because I've come to you with questions and I feel like one day Pete probably wants to run away from me every time he sees me at BCDO because I'm like, hey man, can I ask you this? Like, and usually I'm just looking for encouragement, and you're always so open to sharing. I've actually found people in this space of the specialty contact lens world are really, really open to sharing. Like, I love my friend Shalu in Toronto. Shalu's like one of the kindest, sweetest people. Anytime I have a question, she's like, open book, wants to help no matter what. Do you know Anith Pillay by any chance down in
not personally, but
in Dallas, in Texas? He's super, like, he is one of those guys who's like, he's like so excited to just like help. He wants more people to come into the space. And he always talks about like going to conferences. And he's like, if you ever go to one of these conferences, you just walk into a bar, you see a bunch of specialty contact lens people, tell them you're new, they'll all just come and crowd around you and give you like advice and information. Everybody seems really, really, you know, happy to share. Going back to your point about information, there's this kind of funny quote that I always keep in my mind, that if information is all we needed to succeed, everybody would have $1 million and six-pack abs, right? Because we consume so much information. It's about the actual implementation and taking the action, right? And going back to Anith as well, how he kind of shared similar to how he got into specialty contacts as well. He was like, when I was an associate, if I had downtime, I would just listen to lectures, I would just read, just the same way you're saying. So there's a lot of consistency in how you kind of develop that skill set. And of course, at the end of the day, you got to do it. You got to get your hands in there. And just to share my own story, like, hopefully none of my patients are listening to this. All right, but the first couple of scleral lens fits, honestly, I really didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I knew something because I went to Pete's workshop at BCDO a couple of years ago. So I knew like the basics of how to get a lens on and like what to look for, how to measure the sag and that kind of stuff. But like, that was it, right? And last thing I want to kind of echo on your part is the people at the companies that you work with, right? So I would email and I would write all my findings and I would say, okay, this is what I measured, this is what I guessed. No worries, I'll take it from here, send me a lens, it works, it fits, the patient can see, right? And once you do that a few times, all of a sudden you're like, hey, I'm pretty good at this. And your confidence builds, right? It only builds when you actually do it and you get the proof of actually having some success. So, sorry to kind of like repeat some of the stuff you're saying, but I want to just say it from my own perspective as well. It's like so true. I don't expect myself to get to your level, but like I'd like that I'm able to dabble a little bit and offer my patients something that I haven't been able to in the last while. I was just telling you before we started recording, I've only been doing this for a year or so, trying to get more and more into it. But the last couple of months, it's been like, okay, almost every week, a new Scleral or a new ortho-K. It keeps me on my toes. It actually has got me re-energized to go into practice and see patients again. It's exciting.
Yeah, and there's a huge need. There's a huge need, right? The patients are out there, and I truly believe that. And I really think that there needs to be more people doing this well, really is what it comes down to, right? There's so much opportunity to really help our patients, right? And I constantly see patients that have sort of struggled with some of these things and struggled with some of their fittings and stuff like that. And it's hard for them to know and think, and they'll read, they're on now the average sort of consumer or patient nowadays, I feel, is way more informed, very well informed and very well educated with their options. And they have a certain condition, they're on these forums or Googling things, and they're reading or seeing that, hey, this should work for me, right? They try it out, for whatever reason, they're struggling, it's not working. And I think that that's one of the sort of hardest things about the implementation, really, is it's easy to sort of put a lens on the eye and get that like, aha, like, oh my gosh, this is awesome when it comes to vision. What's hard is then everything that comes after that, really, truly, right? Like, that follow-up where the patient's like, yeah, it's great for an hour, but then the rest of my day sucks, or I'm struggling with this, or I'm struggling with that. It's like, everything after that initial aha that almost like snags the patient, that's the challenge. That's the stuff that really, the providers need to sort of know how to troubleshoot, how to figure that out. And that's the stuff that can be, again, a little bit of a challenge, a little bit of a time sink, on your day, right? And you get to know these patients a lot because you see them quite a bit. So
that's so true. That's so true. And that's actually kind of what I was saying earlier that's kind of where I'm at with, like, some of these fits are taking me a bit longer and I have to remeasure or make a new lens or whatever it might be. Because I'm not so good at problem solving and troubleshooting. So, okay, we had our little kumbaya moment there where it's like, wow, this is so amazing and the community is amazing and it's kind of fun to start to fit. But you start to then hit these points. And I know you gave me a little bit of a name for this, which we call death by scleral lenses. So tell me a bit about, like, you've already kind of led into it a bit, but what that looks like, and then how do we go about dealing with these issues?
Yeah, and I don't know who sort of like first coined the phrase, really, but it's something that I've heard from like some of the people that are in the industry and hear them say that. And as you see more and more patients, you really understand what that means. And there's just some of those patients that you devote so much time, so much energy, and you almost hit a wall and you think, I don't know what else to do. And you look at the patient, you look at their condition, you say, I don't know why this isn't working, right? This should be a slam dunk for whatever reason. And that's always been a challenge, and trying to sort of like then get to that point of what do you do next, right? And then you start thinking personally, like, how do you then sort of get back to that point of, if I knew this starting, like, was there something about that patient that it should have led me a different way? And I remember listening to a pod, this is years ago. This is when I was first trying to sort of, consider this becoming almost a specialist in this field. And that's something I was really trying to dive into. And I remember hearing someone say, what makes you truly a specialist in this or anything else, like, is not knowing how to fit a lens. It's not knowing how to fit this lens or that lens. But it's knowing, when is this lens going to work or not work? What is the best truly, what's the best lens or the best route for this patient sitting in your chair right there? And that's sort of what, again, tries to sort of help avoid that wall that you're going to hit down the road, is one of the ways to try to do that. The other thing too is that there's some things that we just didn't know, but we now have certain technologies, certain devices that can help sort of figure this out or help sort of quantify what that patient's struggling with, where before we couldn't.
That's excellent. That's such important insight, actually, the whole what makes you an expert thing, because just because I fit sclerals doesn't mean I am any kind of an expert in any of that space. But having the experience, having the know-how, listening to like one or two words that a patient maybe has said to me to now direct me in which way to go. To go off on a bit of a tangent, as you know, I do all the time, but like there's a story that I heard recently in a completely different field, but is kind of relevant. I don't know if you've heard of this story about these firefighters in the Man Gulch. It's not recent. It's been a while, but they're these jumpers, the firefighters that have to jump into a place to fight a wildfire, and they were fighting this fire, and all of a sudden it picked up crazy speed because of the wind, and it started like almost engulf them. They're running, and now they have to run up a hill, and doing that, obviously you're going to run a lot slower, and the fire is also going to catch you a lot faster. And most of them are running up the hill, but one of them, who I guess has more experience in fighting wildfires, thought to do something very counter, which was stop, and he burnt a bunch of the grass around him. He had enough time to do this, and he stayed right there, and the fire went around him. And unfortunately, it took the lives of many others who are trying to run up the hill. But that's that like idea of like thinking, you know, an expert just thinks about something a little bit differently. Everybody else thinks run, another person thinks I'm just going to stay put, right? In your field of the scleral lenses or specialty contacts, I might say, oh, this person's a perfect candidate for a scleral, but you're saying, hang on a second, I heard something in there that makes me either not want to do sclerals or think about some of this other technology that we're going to talk about. So anyways, a little bit of a tangent there, but I thought a little bit relevant also. So let's say you start hitting some of these patients. Now, of course, what happens when you start doing a specialty anything is a lot of crazy cases come out of the woodwork. Usually those are like some of the first people you see. But especially when you go as deep as you do, you start seeing the more complex stuff, the stuff that like I can't fix that I want to send over to you now. And then you have to start to adapt and evolve and bring in technology to help you with those patients. So tell me a little bit about that. What's some of the unique stuff that you've brought in here?
One of the first things is just understanding the capabilities of the lenses you're using. I heard someone once say you should no longer ask what can this lens design do, but more you should ask what can't it do. There's some great sort of lenses, even just local Canadian labs that I work with that, you know, the lenses have tons of capabilities, whether it's multifocal optics, whether it's like quadrant specific design changes that you can make, whether it's like microvaults that you can sort of utilize to vault over pinguecula. And like, these are things that historically used to like fit a scleral lens. The patient's got a massive pinguecula, they're going to get some irritation there, and used to sort of not be able to sort of figure that out or troubleshoot that. Well, now we can sort of utilize microvaults. Even things that, again, you're thinking about like more extreme cases, these sort of glaucoma blebs, these filtering surgeries that are these massive areas now of the conjunctiva that, you know, that's where the lens is supposed to land. Now, how you get around that? So being able to offer like impression-based scleral lens designs is something that in those cases that nothing else works, like I said, is now opening up doors, opening up opportunities to sort of get these patients in lenses. And sometimes it's these most extreme cases that benefit the most. And so it's so great to be able to offer something to these patients, make a huge difference in their lives, being able to, you know, get them seeing to a level that other modalities and other sort of refractive options just can't truly. And even just sometimes once you hit that point and being able to offer things to improve the vision further, there's so many cases where things are going to sort of, you hit a wall, not from a fitting standpoint, but from a vision standpoint. And there's some cases that just don't make sense. You know, I think of a patient that I recently had where, you know, there was no reason why it shouldn't have worked. Their vision shouldn't have been fantastic. You know, you do the over-refraction, you do it again, you sort of try to troubleshoot and understanding that, again, higher order aberrations are a big part of that. And now being able to, again, quantify that, but also even to offer solutions to improve higher order aberrations has been fantastic in my practice.
That's awesome. So you're talking impression-based, so you're putting some stuff in their eye, goopy stuff. I've seen it kind of measures the contours of the eye exactly.
So it takes a mold, or an impression of the lens. And what they do is then they scan that mold, they create a 3D model of the eye in their software, and then design a lens. Again, it's a free-form lens that fits over all the contours and the shape of their eye.
That's incredible. And then the higher order aberrations. So I kind of teased off the very top that we're recording a couple of episodes, Pete and I, and this one is a bit more general overall building a specialty practice. But the next one is for those of you who are really into specialty contacts. We're going to dive deep into higher order aberrations, which Peter just referred to right now. So maybe a quick touch on what are higher order aberrations and how do they affect our vision. And then if that's something that's kind of interesting to you who's listening right now or watching, make sure you watch out for the next episode because we're going to dive deeper into that.
Yeah, and how I like to explain to my patients, because again, a lot of this stuff is hard to grasp as a patient and try to like sort of get to their level so they understand what's going on or why things aren't working. And I always like to tell them that aberration is just a fancy word for blur in my mind. And I tell them I deal with, the reason why people come in to see me for my primary care is just aberration, but it's lower order aberration, right? It's, you know, reasons why they can't see the board at school. It's reasons why, you know, they're struggling to read, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I sort of separate all of that. And I say the lower order aberrations are the things that we can correct with sort of regular contact lenses, glasses, et cetera, et cetera. I said the higher order aberrations are the things that sort of lead to sort of visual struggles that are not corrected by those traditional methods. And these can come from a lot of different sort of sources. We think about sort of how we apply this. A lot of times it's corneal sort of source for this aberration, whether it's ectatic diseases like keratoconus, whether it's sort of patients that are transplants, whether it's sort of different things that are going to lead to sort of this essentially irregular surface on the eye. And that irregularity, you know, sort of through that visual pathway, that optical pathway to their retina is going to lead to sort of this sort of higher order aberration. And these are things that patients are going to struggle with. And these are the ones that there's a disconnect, I feel, between the provider and the patient. Historically, we would tell the patient, hey, look how good you see down the chart, and we're so proud and excited with our refraction, and here's your new pair of glasses, and you're gonna love life. Well, they leave thinking, hey, I'm gonna be happy. They pick up their glasses, they're walking out the door, but they're still struggling. Right? And there's this huge disconnect now between what we're telling them and what they're living. And then they start questioning, okay, well, why is that? Is it me? Is it the person? They try another doctor, the same thing with that provider. And essentially, how we measure the vision, that's not essentially quantifying the amount of aberration.
Right.
It's not quantifying the struggles that these patients might have. And there's ways now for, again, you were alluding to, for us to, again, measure and quantify that and help bridge that gap and bridge that sort of disconnect between what the patient's living and experience day to day and what we're telling them in the exam room, really.
100%. And I think that any optometrist listening, even optician listening, anybody who's trying to correct their vision with some form of optical device, glasses, contacts, whatever, if you've been practicing long enough, you've had those patients, multiple, most likely patients, where you give them what you think is the best prescription. You've tried to refine that SIL as much as you can, and you've done everything else. And they're looking at black letters on a white chart. It looks amazing. But as soon as they leave the office, they're just like, nope, it's blurry. I don't like it. It's uncomfortable. We've all had those patients. And I guess that's maybe we haven't been able to answer why that's happening. But higher order aberrations is the reason. So even if you're not into super, specialty contact lens, that you don't have that type of practice, but you're curious as to why patients are experiencing these higher order aberrations and how we can quantify and treat these, you want to make sure you listen to the next episode as well. We're going to dive a little deeper into that. So Pete, we've kind of touched on a lot of stuff here. We talked about, your training, how you got into it, your staff training, which I think is really valuable for anybody, any practice. That developing that algorithm, that patient journey, all the different types of contacts you fit, the snags you've hit along the way. Anything that we haven't talked about that you think we should discuss?
I think it's just sort of find your passion, really. I love this. My staff and my brother are constantly joking around. My brother says any excuse, he always says when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So every patient I see, he says, I'm looking for a reason to put him in a lens kind of thing. And I'm truly passionate about this. I truly love it. I enjoy what I do. And I think that that's really the magic to making this work, really, in my practice is I enjoy it. I really enjoy it. There's times where it's not worth it. You know what I mean? You think about the algorithm, you think about the metrics, there's times where, from a financial standpoint, I'd be better off just selling a pair of glasses. I'd be spending less time after hours, sort of designing lenses, consulting with the labs. I'd be spending less time outside of that if I just did regular care. But I truly enjoy it. I truly do. And it makes it enjoyable, and I feel like it keeps me excited to sort of continuously sort of build the practice, build the specialty within the practice, and even, keep staff engaged. It keeps patients think it's cool, right? When there's something different, something that we can offer that maybe they didn't even realize was out there. I think of how many conversations I have with other providers, other patients, and a lot of the stuff that is sort of becoming routine in my practice is sort of, again, blows their mind sometimes that it's something that we can even offer, we can do.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. The passion is so key, right? If you don't love what you don't love it, you're not going to spend the time to do that extra work to read up and study and practice and all of that kind of stuff. That's so key. All right, a couple more questions for you before we wrap up. First, where could people find you if they had more questions for you, if you wanted to reach out to you?
Yeah, so again, our office website, office email is the best way to sort of reach out, especially for colleagues and stuff. We talked about sort of referrals, and one of the challenges I feel that, is OD to OD referrals, not just for this, but for any specialty,
So true.
And, people are always afraid to lose the patient, right? Because again, we're all building our practices. We all want to, doing hard work to sort of build relationships with our patients. And last thing you want to see is any patient walk out your door, right? Truly. And so being able to provide some reassurance that any patient that we get for a consultation is we're not doing primary care, we're not selling them glasses, we're not sort of diving into and stepping on anyone's toes, right? And really, I think that's been one of the challenges is sort of, we talked about trust, right? Trust for a lot of these things is sort of really establishing trust that if people are sending our patients our way for this type of stuff, we're sending them right back for everything else, right? And I think that that's an important point to make, really, and to understand that, our goal is not to steal patients. Our goal is to provide care and offer things that other offices don't offer. So.
Absolutely. And that creates a much more cohesive effort for us to help service our patients, all of our patients better. And it makes our profession look better. I've talked about this quite a lot on the podcast before, where these OD to OD referrals are so important for our profession to grow. If we have to refer everything out to a specialist or ophthalmologist or somebody outside of optometry, it just creates gaps. It creates gaps where other entities can come in and infiltrate or potentially disrupt the profession and change the course of our trajectory of the entire profession. But if we're cohesive, if we're working together, referring to one another, and we trust one another, really it builds the profession. In the patient's eyes, it makes us look like the experts, which we are. So 100% agree with you on that, Pete. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so your office email is?
info@prpiceyecare.com.
Prpic is Prpic, eyecare.com. Okay, just in case you want to reach out to Pete, you want to make any referrals, make sure you reach out. You have kids?
Yes.
How old are they?
I have a 4 and a 2-year-old.
4 and 2. Do they watch Disney movies yet?
Yeah, they've gone
a little
into
bit.
some, yeah.
Have they watched Moana, the first
Yes.
one? Okay, so you've watched it, that means?
Yes.
In Moana, Dwayne Johnson plays Maui, that demigod character, and he has a song that's called You're Welcome, which is like this, he's egotistical, he's given all these amazing things to everyone, and he's like, you're welcome. All right, so this is your chance as the expert on the podcast here to share something, one piece of profound insight or information, a quote that you felt has really helped you in your career with all of us to help make our lives better, and then I'll say thank you, and you'll say you're welcome.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
All right, Peter, what's that one profound piece of advice that you could share with us?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing is listen to your business. Your business is telling you a story. If you can sort of look at the metrics, look at the numbers, it's going to lay out sort of where you're headed and based on what you're doing. And it helps guide the decisions you're going to make next, right? If you're thinking about bringing in a new piece of equipment, if you're thinking about changing your hours, if you're thinking about sort of, doing anything within the practice, just if you're not tracking those metrics, you don't know what the story is. So pay attention to it, look into it, and it helps guide what you should be doing next and guiding your decisions. My brother and I have really sort of approached our patient care and our practice in that way, and it's been fantastic.
That's amazing, amazing. Your business is telling you a story. I love that. That's awesome. Pete, thank you. This was awesome. This was a great interview. So much value. So once again, thank you. And if you found some value, I would find it hard to believe if you did not find some value in this conversation. But if you found some value, please share it. Send a link to a friend. Put a screenshot up on Instagram. Tag me. Let me know what you loved about this conversation. And make sure you stay tuned next week for the next episode. Again with Pete, we're going to be diving into more advanced technical conversations about Scleral's higher order aberrations and ways that we can help serve our patients better. Thank you to everybody for watching and listening to the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. I'll see you guys in the next episode.